Hi, this is Paul, Mr. Wonderful Orndorff, reminding you that the importance of eating the right food is to start off with a good breakfast. For a lot of you people out there that would like to look like wonderful, this is the way to start. Start off with a good breakfast.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Tyler Elenick, and this is the Some Kind of Wonderful podcast with Travis Orndorff. Travis, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, Tyler, how are you doing? Can I ask you a question? I've already decided I have a nickname for you. Instead of E.T., can I call you T.E.?
Yeah, I'm with it.
Okay, cool.
So this is the inaugural episode of the Some Kind of Wonderful podcast. So I'm hoping you can kind of tell the listener what they can expect coming up with this podcast. How is this podcast going to be different from the million of wrestling podcasts that are already out there?
So, number one, and I totally respect all the podcasts out there. Like,
me too, absolutely. I'm a fan of many of them.
Yes. But this isn't a podcast to understand what it's like to be a wrestler. This is a podcast to understand what it's like to be a human being.
That's right.
And in this situation, it just happens to be that my father was a professional wrestler, and our first guest was Eric Bischoff's son, Garett Bischoff. And you heard me say on the podcast, Garett calls him Daddy. He doesn't call him Eric, right? So this is a totally different perspective. Mr. Wonderful was not my father. My father was Daddy. So I think you're going to get a totally different perspective on what it was like to grow up in this industry. And the positives and negatives, both emotionally, physically, and I hope that we accomplish to help people understand the mental capacity and the things that go into being a wrestler on the road and what the real life looks like, not just the Thursday night or Monday night Raw. Understand what these people deal with when they're not in a ring. And Garett grew up with, his father and, decided to go into wrestling at an early age. I didn't make that decision. So having these conversations with these individuals, that it's a dysfunctional family. Like we're the most messed up family ever, but somehow we're all related because our family grew up in wrestling. So, like talking to Garett, it felt like I was talking to an older brother or younger brother, excuse me.
That was exactly going to be my point, is that they often talk about like the sisterhood or brotherhood of professional wrestlers, the fact that only they know what that's like. Only the children of wrestlers or wrestling personalities know what that's like.
It truly is. And so, you see my father, on, YouTube and all these videos, and you see Eric Bischoff on all these videos and Garett Bischoff in all these videos. What you didn't see recorded was Garett and my dad and Eric going to South Georgia and wrestling outside of wrestling, and going hunting together in South Georgia. Like these are human beings. Mm-hmm. Like Mr. Wonderful was Paul.
Yeah.
Eric was Eric. Garett was Garett. And these guys get to be together in the midst of all of that chaos. And, Garett understands what I went through being the son of a celebrity, and he does a great job of relating to us what it was like to be that kid, right? Mm-hmm. So he was doing his best just to be Garett Bischoff, irregardless of wrestling, and that's the tough part.
But I'm interested in kind of finding out, peeling back the layers, if you will, finding out what was behind that character. Because we're talking about the 80s, right? The magic was still there with wrestling. It's still there in a lot of ways, but not the way it was back then. So when your bops turn on Hogan, for example, I want to know how that kind of heel turn affected, the trickle-down effect of that kind of turn on screen. How did that affect a son, a daughter, a wife, a brother, a sister? And that's, what I hope we kind of explore on this podcast a little bit, because they straight up hated your dad. You know what I mean?
Intensely. Like they genuinely believed my father was evil.
Yeah.
And if you look at the 80s versus the 90s, in the late 80s, people were still kind of calling it sports entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
But by the late 90s, they knew this was,
Yeah.
A show, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I was young, my dad would go to these towns and get so much heat. People would throw darts at him in the ring.
Amazing.
We were in Philadelphia, and we got transported from the stadium to a car in the back of an ambulance to get out of town because my dad turned on Hogan. And to your point, like, I had friends that told me, 17 years later, hey, Travis, I remember when we were kids and I hated you because your dad turned on Hogan. Because at that time, it was real. Like,
Absolutely.
that was, you had just turned on America.
That's right. That's right. And speaking of getting heat, you posted a video of your dad before he passed about, that a lot of people sparked a lot of attention, and you got a lot of heat for posting it. I wanted to know if you wanted to take the time now to kind of explain the reasons behind posting that video of your father in that kind of state.
All right. Give me a second. So I've struggled with this. I truly have. At the time when I went to the hospital and they finally let me, come in, and I saw him in that condition, I was so mad. I blamed so many people. We were dealing with, a government lockdown. That's a whole nother conversation. My dad had bounced around from different places. And so let me just give some context that 6 years
Mhm.
ago, I tried to get my dad to move in with me in Atlanta and leave the situation he was in, but he refused to do it.
Hmm.
So, I kind of wondered, could I have forced him? But, he's my dad. I didn't want to, disrespect his wishes, whether I didn't know if he understood. But by the time I got to the hospital and I was able to cut through, the commercial and corporate BS, and it was so jacked up. I don't even know how to explain it other than I had no power, no authority, and no way of making change. And I had tried, for several years. So when this finally came to fruition and I saw him in that state, which was the worst state I had ever seen him in. And when I saw that, I went, I'm done. Enough's enough. I can't fight this and kayfabe it anymore.
Right.
Because that's really what it was. Like, I got phone calls and text messages from wrestlers. They're like, why are you exposing this? And I'm like, because it's real. And this is what my dad's dealing with. And I can't get the hospital to help me. I just want my daddy. I want my daddy to come home with me. And so it frustrated a lot of people. My dad was a man's man. Yeah, but he was a family man too. And I guarantee he never wanted to end up in that situation physically and mentally, and even more so be abandoned to the point that, the hospital was going to take care of him till his dying day. Now, what I didn't know is when I got custody of him that, they basically didn't expect him to live much longer, but I don't regret that video. I'm glad I took it down. I don't watch it anymore, but it was a means to an end. And, in this stage of my life, it's justifiable. I understand it. And if people don't like it, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I think that it definitely accomplished the goal that you set out, which was to get your dad out of that facility and back with people who love him and will take care of him. Because that second video you posted shortly after that of the ride out from that place, your dad had gotten a haircut, looking tight, looking like Mr. Wonderful, singing along to CCR. Have you ever seen the rain? I mean, that video, when I watched it, we didn't even know each other at that point.
Right.
And that video brought, a smile to my face to see that he could make that transition and that the video accomplished, as much as it hurt to watch that first video.
It got people engaged. I got a facility up in Norcross to take him in order to transition him to live with me. Now we didn't know at the time all the issues and the medical issues, and because it had just been so we've been misled and whatnot. But
Mm-hmm.
by the time he got to that facility, they were like, Travis, he's okay. He can come home. And I was like, whatever I gotta do, let's do it. And so I'm grateful. As weird as it sounds, knowing that my dad went through what he went through, both physically, mentally, like that wasn't anybody else's fault. That those were choices he made. But I'm grateful I was able to be strong enough, as weird as that sounds, to unkayfabe the situation.
Yeah.
People wanted my dad to just live like Mr. Wonderful till he died, but that wasn't real.
Right.
And so when I exposed his reality, it was my reality. And
Yeah.
it encouraged me to fight the system. But when you're in that situation, you're desperate.
Yeah.
You're genuinely desperate. Like it's your father. It's your father.
Yeah.
So I think most people can't understand it because they haven't been in that situation. And I'll tell you this, like if you had sat me down and tried to explain to me what it was going to be like as a human being when my father died, you would have never been able to convince me of the emotional wreck I would be, that I had to try to figure out my own identity after he passed, because what happened to me? What does this mean anymore now that I'm here without my father?
Mm-hmm.
It changed my identity.
I think that like a lot of the people's issue is that they thought they didn't know the reasons why you posted it, right? They thought it was just exploiting your dad, exploiting his condition. And I think that's without knowing that, like you said, context, without knowing the context of why you posted it. They thought they just went exploitive.
Here's the thing, and Tyler, I don't mean to interrupt, but let me just jump in here and say, like if I wanted to exploit my dad, I would have done it over the last 43 years of my life. Yep. I have never been on social media. Like like the only times I've ever been on social media was to raise money for my father to help him out. Right. Like I did Twitter and GoFundMe back in 2014. Anyway, I did that and I came back online on Instagram, prior to my dad passing, but I've never made a penny off his name.
Right.
I've never asked for a penny off his name. Any money that's ever come to me has gone directly to him. It paid for his funeral. It paid for his headstone and it paid for his property taxes. So at no point in time have I ever tried to exploit my father as Travis Orndorff. I like, so when people say that, I just laugh. Like I don't need any recognition. So I just want you to understand that we all stand on the shoulders of giants, and my father was a giant. And if I can do anything to tell his story that'll help other people, either through the mental and physical abuse he grew up with or the wrestling world, then I have an opportunity to help other people based on his story. So I'm going to do that. And that's my entire intent.
I'm glad you've had the opportunity to kind of set the record straight, so to speak. And
I don't regret it. I really don't regret it. Like at the time I questioned myself because I had never put anything online bringing attention to me. And I was afraid of it because, I work in corporate America. So, you put that stuff online and all of a sudden you apply for a job and HR is looking up, so I had to be smart, but at the same time, I just kind of gave up. I didn't care. Like if I got my daddy home and he spent the last few weeks with me and it destroyed my career or it pissed off a bunch of people at that point, I didn't care. Okay, go ahead. I'm good.
And about that Instagram, you're able to document some of those days. I mean, you having a beer with your dad, and that really
non-alcoholic
beer with your dad. Let me correct the record. And then that final hug, which a lot of people, broke a lot of people's hearts. Seeing that final image, just before he passed.
It's funny because we're 5 months out, but when that happened, there was just you can't fake it. You like, there was just these instances where my dad was present and was my dad. Like he came up that night and hugged me. He's like, Trav, hug me. Right. And there was times when I would talk to him and I didn't know if he knew it was me or whatnot, but there was those moments. And that was one of those moments where he was like, Trav, hug me. And then, I took him to his bed, and at one point in time, he pulled me down, like he grabbed my arm and he pulled me down and said, I love you. So I was blessed that by bringing him in when I did, I got these few rare moments right before he was no longer lucid. And I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Wow. And just to follow up on that kind of emotion that you just shared and that kind of personal story, that's really what you've heard during this little preamble, if you want to call it that. You've heard some comedy, some funny stuff, and you've heard some heart-wrenching stuff. And I think that's what this podcast is really going to have, those kinds of two levels that are constantly going to be a pull and push between those kind of two feelings of the comical side of the wrestling world and kind of the real side, the kind of emotional and physical side of it that a lot of people don't really know about these men and women. That I think it's going to be a chance to kind of show light on some of those aspects of those people.
Yeah, I want to say that I think people that become fans forget the humanity of the individual,
That's right.
because they're so enamored with the character that they don't know what it's like for that person to wake up in the morning, go get breakfast, go, take a shower, just be a human. And, my dad was bipolar. He grew up in a really tough situation. So, to be able to share that kind of, again, context, and so that people understand, you decide to go into wrestling, like he had no other choice.
Yeah.
Like he had no other choice. So if you decide to go into wrestling, you have a choice. So don't tell me that you didn't know what you were getting into. Back then they didn't know, right?
Right. No, we know the effect of CTE and brain injuries.
Correct. And at the end of the day, that would not have changed my dad's decision. He still would have done it.
Well said, sir. Any kind of final thoughts before we kind of throw to our first interview on the podcast with Garett Bischoff?
I'm so excited about the interview with Garett. He was very open and transparent. He's an amazing person. He gets it. Even talking to him and the couple times we've talked and getting to know him, he understands and has a perspective about this business that transcends wrestling. So he's put things in perspective, and I think you will truly enjoy some of the stories about him and my father, as well as just, his ideas and thoughts on the wrestling business as it's transitioned over the last 20 years.
Excellent. And just so people know that I am on the interview, but I am just at the laugh track, basically, because there's a lot of hilarity that's going to ensue here in the upcoming seconds. So Travis will be handling all the question asking. I'm just kind of on air as an on-air producer in case he needs me. But without further ado, here's Travis and Garett.
Welcome to the inaugural podcast for Some Kind of Wonderful. My name is Travis Orndorff, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to introduce Garett Bischoff. Garett, how are you, sir?
Brother, I'm doing awesome, and I'm honored to be your first guest on your first episode. That's pretty damn cool.
It's funny. I was thinking of the nostalgia over the last week after we've talked a couple of times, just catching up. And, I got to share a story with you about my dad, obviously, and his sentiments on your father, and some of the last things he said to me, about your dad. We were in Vegas, and we were doing an interview, and your dad's name came up, and he said, your dad didn't give up on him, and I don't think people understood. I don't think people actually appreciate that Eric Bischoff created a world that threatened Vince McMahon, that's unheard of. I mean, truly, it's unheard, to the point that he had to buy out WCW. I always thought that's a credit to your dad, but he brought in different talent. I mean, people think about, a lot of the talent that was in New York, but he had that talent WCW. They just had higher paying contracts, so they left and went to New York. But what your dad created, for my father, he created a legacy because he was allowed to become the power plant trainer. So, I've always been grateful to your father for that opportunity, because I always thought my dad got to do something he really loved. He loved wrestling, but training was really where his heart was. And so on behalf of myself and my family, please tell your father how grateful we are that he didn't give up on an old man that had a few injuries later in his life.
No, absolutely. You know, my pops, and you know, I'm sure we'll get into this as we go, but you know, I was pretty young back then, so I probably didn't recognize as much then. I just didn't see it or get it. But you know, later on in life, you know, anytime your dad came up in a conversation, you know, my old man's never had a bad word to say. He always put him over strong and had a lot of respect for him. And as we go through this, you know, it was more than just business. You know, there was a friendship outside of that. So it was, you know, and your old man was always just so cool to me, even as a young raggedy kid that's probably just annoying and hanging in there. But you know, he always made the time just to, hey, what's up, kid? You know, hey, how's school? How's this? How's your mom? You know, it's just always made a point to go out of his way, and he didn't have to. He just did because he was that kind of guy. He was a genuine guy. He was a man's man. He was a stud, you know. But he had a heart the size of a truck.
I think that's what was so. I think that's what is missed about your father and my father is the number of people that they took under their wing and developed. You know, your dad got heat. My dad got heat. But if you really look back, think about the number of people that Eric Bischoff impacted in the wrestling business. Like, period. Yeah. And I mean legacies, multiple years. Like he's been an impact in wrestling for the last 3 decades. And I think we'll still feel that, you know, going forward. And, you know, my dad was unique to his time. And I think Eric or your dad, you know, he understood how to manage my father because he was not, you know, my dad was bipolar and crazy. Like at the end of the day, wonderful man, but, you know, you had to know how to manage his emotions and your dad understood him and didn't take that personally. And then put my dad in the best position to be successful. So I think that's one thing that your dad did well is he knew where to put people so that they would do the best at what they could do.
Sure, yeah, and that's a big part of it. When you're in that position, you have to, you know, it can't. Yeah, it's like herding wet cats with these people, you know, with wrestlers. And these people, I'm one of these people. It's like you get it. You know, we get a. We can very easily turn into a bunch of prima donnas. We want what we want, especially when you get cranky. You've been on the road for 6 months straight, and you know it's not easy. But when you learn how to, if you can just give them enough leeway to let them be them, but know how to keep them reeled in at the same time, it's a tough thing to do. But you know, if you can figure that out, it definitely helps. It helps everybody.
And so here's kind of a weird question. So I've always hated this question. That I get, which is why didn't I go into wrestling? And number one, I'm 5'9" and maybe 185 pounds. So let's not get into the athletics that I didn't, you know, inherit. But after seeing you and Randy Orton and The Rock, I realized I'm just one of the ugliest offspring of any of the professional wrestling community. And I was never good looking enough to be a wrestler. So, cause all of y'all are better looking than your fathers. Whereas I look like Danny DeVito next to Arnold Schwarzenegger in Twins.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And double thank you for putting me in the same category as Randy Orton and The Rock. I ain't nowhere near them boys.
Oh, well, you may not be as famous, but you're just as pretty, man. Oh, man. So, you know, one of the things that we talked about this week was, you know, our relationship that we had kind of in the sense that we grew up in this world that nobody truly understands unless you grew up in it. You don't know how to explain the business and the athleticism and the show. Like if you understand what agents do and how this is booked and how they come up and how much independence is given to the wrestlers when it comes to matches, but at the same time, you know, making sure that it's gone through the agent so there's not too many finishes being the same. Like it's a complex world and it requires so much communication. And, you know, I think about the time you grew up in wrestling and when you transitioned and became a wrestler versus the time, you know, where my dad grew up and he was training with Hiro Matsuda. And I know about your training, so I'm not as worried about that as much as what did it look like physically? Like when you were training to become a wrestler and you obviously are looking at, you know, people like Kevin Nash, you know, Lex Luger, that being that late 90s version. How did that influence your workouts? Like, where did you go? Like, who gave you a workout? How did you build? Who gave you your diet plan? Who gave you your protein? Like, because my dad, like, I had a workout plan from the time I was 5, and I am not joking. Now, I didn't do it, but I had a plan.
Right.
But I would come home from, lunch, and my dad would be like, here's the protein shake because you're going to football practice at 4:00. Like, we weren't allowed to have butter, salt, pepper on the table. It was the weirdest. Like, I didn't have like cheese until I was 18. Y'all think I'm joking? I'm totally serious. So
grilled chicken, broccoli, and egg whites.
Oh God Almighty! Yeah, it was like, here's the fish. Here's a lemon. That's not seasoning, Dad. That we're not Jewish. We're not in the Sea of Galilee. Give me some salt, bro. But because you look like you look like you're about 225, if I had to guess. But you're fit. You did well. Your dad obviously wasn't the athletic guy. Gives you all the credit for the athleticism. Where did your work ethic come from, and who got you in the gym when you were that age to help you develop? Because obviously, no offense to your dad, I'm assuming it didn't come from him.
No, well, so it's I started naturally. I mean, I was a skinny little kid. Like I got my mom's side of the genes, my mom's side of the family, and everyone's real minus the height. But I'm like 5'11". I'm barely just under 6 foot. But I couldn't put on size and weight to save my life. Like I always had a six pack, but I didn't have. I mean, I couldn't fill out a shirt to save my life. I just didn't have that ever.
Ironically, if you drink a 6-pack, you can fill out a shirt.
Yeah, I can drink it. Times 4.
Amen.
So I guess it was probably my my freshman, sophomore year of high school when I got in, and at the time we were living in Atlanta still. I went to South Cobb High School. They still offered a weight training class, or weight training for elective courses, I guess is what they called them, I think. And that's when I really started getting, I don't want to say serious about it, but that's when I got the bug, I guess. So I started working out in high school. And it was around that same time when I really started, like I'd always been around the wrestling business, obviously, and I'd always been infatuated with it. I've always been obsessed with it, but it never really clicked that that's what I wanted to do up until about that sophomore, junior year of high school. Like, okay, this is, I think, what I want to do. So at that time, and Diamond Dallas Page, he lived like 2 doors down from us. Same neighborhood.
I used to live in East Cobb, so
yes,
you were right over there in Smyrna, right?
Right, Mableton, right off of Nick and Jack
Mableton,
Road.
Okay, yeah, Mableton, yeah.
Yep, right off of Nick and Jack Road, right where they started building that East-West connector there.
Yep, 218.
So DDP would bring me to and back in the day there was the Main Event Fitness. That's what Sting and Luger owned that gym, Main Event Fitness. So DDP, and that's where the boys worked out. So on Saturdays he would pick me up in the mornings, and I started working out in high school, and then he would bring me over to the gym on weekends sometimes to start working out with the boys. And that was it was short lived because I was a teenager and I found other things to do on weekends. But that's kind of where I got the bug. And then I just really kind of got in and took it upon myself. I mean, I know I wanted to be. It was hard for me to break 165 pounds. I just couldn't do it, no matter how much I ate, how much I trained. I just couldn't break it. And we ended up moving to Arizona. I think I was 16, so that would have been the summer between my sophomore and junior year. I did freshman and sophomore year in Atlanta. Moved to Arizona. Same thing. Jumped in the weight training class in school. It was one of the only classes I actually showed up for. School was not my strong suit by any means. If I was showing up, it was just to get in a fight or, catch a workout and fucking get out.
Can I guess that your sister's the opposite? She was the book nerd?
Absolute opposite.
Yeah. So just so you know, my brother was the firstborn, and he was in prison by the time I was 6. And, I went to college at, 18. So we took different paths.
Completely different.
I'm with you. I'm not sure how that gene passes. It's bullshit, though. I'll tell you that.
We were both on the principal's list. Hers was for honor roll and education. Mine was because I was a dick. And it wasn't too long after that a small little mom and pop gym had opened up right up the street from where we lived. And I went and got a job there as just like the front desk kid. And then it was just a steamroll from there. Then I got into personal training, and then I was hiring. I got personal trainers training me, and Then I got certified as a personal trainer, and then that gym expanded. And then I ended up being part. I mean, I did just about everything you can do in the gym as far as an employee and a personal trainer. And I just fell in love with it. And I finally started seeing the results that I'd always been looking for, breaking through those numbers, 185. 190, holy shoot, 195, now.
But you were 22 at this point, probably. Am I guessing? You just bloomed late.
Not even. I was, probably at that point, I was probably 19, 20 years old.
Oh, wow.
So now I'm just drilling it. I got all these cool, guys like Lee Priest were working out in this gym. So I'd get, I'd be able to jump in and work out with, guys, pro bodybuilders and, learning all their tips and tricks and secrets. And it just kind of became a thing. And then the real bug is everybody starts noticing, like, oh, damn, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And so then that just makes you want it even more, and it just really took off from there. And then I did get into wrestling, so then it became a job. Then I had to stay in shape.
Right.
Nowadays, I'm not in it nearly as much as I used to. I try. I just don't stick with it. I got so much going on with life that
right. Well, wrestling is for younger people. It truly is. Like there's a biological time, just like with football and the NFL, where you take too many hits. So, you start later in life, you might have a little bit longer career, but for my dad, and I want to go into this actually, fairly early in the conversation, because I think you'll relate to it. My dad's day and time where they were working, 350 days a year. Most of the towns were 100 miles apart. So they were traveling from one town to the next day after day. Yeah. And, that was hard on him, I think, both as a father and a husband. Sure. But even more than that was just the wear and tear on his body. So when I was growing up, my dad didn't want me to go into wrestling. Clearly I never inherited anything that I could have. But if I was to go into it, I would have wanted to be on the creative side. So it's funny, because had I been your dad's son, I would have followed him as the executive, going, how do we build this? Like you would have been better served by working out with my dad every day, and I would have been better served getting coached by your father, because that's where our talents probably lie. But hard thing for me was, after all the dieting and all the working out and all that stuff, he was injured almost his entire life. I mean, and most people don't know, they know about his right arm being injured. What they don't know is he had to physically pick up his right arm to use it. Yeah. So he had his 2nd through 8th vertebrae taken out. They put in a cadaver's vertebrae and titanium rod. He had to learn to walk again. I actually talked to Brian Blair the other day,
Old B Blair.
Yeah. My dad called him Beeper. So I was going to say I talked to Beeper, but I was like, y'all are not going to know what I'm talking about. So I was talking to Brian Blair. Number one, he lost his best friend and my dad. Secondly, he lost his son, from a tragic accident. And then he had some difficulties after his recent back surgery where he's learning to walk again. He sent me the pictures, and I kid you not, like, it hurt to look at it. Like I genuinely could feel my posture changing, going, I don't want to look like that. Like it looked like nails, through a board. Yeah. What kind of injuries have you seen? Because I've been injured just from working out. Like, because I got into working out heavy, I ended up paralyzing my right arm just like my dad. I ended up getting back surgery and all that. So I can't imagine that you escaped without any negative physical effects.
No, not at all. Now, mind you, too. So I was a little rugged before I ever got in the ring. So I'd already had, before I even got into wrestling, I had already had a knee surgery and a little bit beat up just from, we'll call it, extracurricular activities.
Amen.
I was a little bit of a scrapper in my younger days.
I heard about that. My dad was a bare knuckle fighter, so yeah. I'm telling you, you and I were born against the wrong. You and my dad would have gone to town. That's probably why he didn't have you, is because then he would have gotten back in trouble.
But I mean, for me personally, other than the run of the mill stuff that you're gonna get when you get bounced around in a ring, 200 plus days a year, I get your shoulder, both my shoulders are shot. And a lot of that's from heavy weightlifting too. I tore myself up from heavy weight training. When you guys got, like, when you're naturally a natural 160 pound, 65 pounder with a frame like mine, and you constantly are training, eating, and lifting to be 225, eventually your body's just only built to withstand what it's built for. It's like trying to put a 1,000 horsepower drag motor in a fucking Pinto. You may get down the road, but eventually the shit's gonna break. You know what I mean? It is what it is. So both my shoulders give me problems. My left one more than anything. I got numbness in my hands. I suffered a number of concussions, which the last one I got, it still affects me to this day.
Yeah, my dad has told me about times where, and I imagine you can relate to this, where he's like, Travis, I don't remember that match. I mean, I got through it, but I hit my bump there. He's like, I blacked out, and I found out where I was the next morning.
The last concussion I got was on a live show. It was me and Knox against AJ Styles. That's what it was. I think it was just that. It's a handicap match. It was me and Knox against AJ Styles, and I got pummeled in the beginning of it, and I knew the next spot. I knew what I was supposed to do, but I couldn't make my body do it. And so it was hitting the ropes. I was supposed to duck a line, get a blind tag, yada yada yada, and I couldn't make myself duck, and I didn't. And fucking AJ took my head off, and I wrestled the rest of that match. And don't. I was on live TV. They pulled me off, and they made me rewatch it. I'm sitting on the outside of the ropes, like just looking. I didn't know where I was. I had no idea where I was, and they benched me for 2 months after that, and they sent me to a concussion specialist not too far from where I live here. And they hooked me up. They put all the probes and the stickers and all the shit like that they do. And at the end of that, the doc comes in and he goes, and at the time I was maybe 20, say I'm 30, almost 38 now. So I was probably 32 maybe ish. And the doc goes, he goes, you have kids? I said, no. He goes, you planning on it? I said, yeah. He goes, you want to remember their names?
Wow.
And that's at 32 years old. He was telling me, he goes, your brain is not that of a 32-year-old. Your brain is that of, I was, and this is 8 years ago. You know what I mean? So, I got bad short-term memory. Like I don't, my wife goes, hey, I need you to go get eggs, milk, chicken. When I get to the store, which is only about 800 yards down the street, I'll have to call her and get eggs and what? You know what I mean? So there's those little things. I think you mentioned something earlier about, TBI and what what that does. And I've never been tested for it, but I'm pretty sure if I did, there's probably something there.
Here's the crazy thing is my dad never even wanted me to play football. Right. So he had so many concussions. Now, granted, I'm going back to, he played college football back in the 70s where the helmets stunk. Like, I can give you the list. That's why I've never been the person that is like, it's Vince McMahon's fault. I'm on the civil action suit. I'm like, no, Vince McMahon didn't know. And what my dad did was way before wrestling.
Listen, we all know what we're getting into when we get into it. You can't blame it on
and wouldn't do it any other way.
Risks. You know what it is. It is what it is. I don't blame anybody. If it's what you're getting into.
And so I've had my own share of concussions and blackouts. We won't get into that for legal reasons, but nonetheless, I can tell you that was the hardest thing to see for me. It was overnight. Like there was short-term memory loss, like for probably 25 years, right?
Yeah.
And then one day I looked at him and he looked at me and I went, he's not sure who I am right now. Now his eyes would light up and I would get it, right? But there was a point where it was like the light bulb turned off. And I think, going back to what your life experiences were, your dad's, my dad's, he had the roughest of them. So he's going to be the extreme. So I don't think he's the poster board or material for wrestling, because he did something way more than anybody else did. But I want to come back to, one of the things that always bothered me is I know how they've introduced new, NFL football pads and helmets and different things. So while I don't necessarily agree with the class action lawsuit, I do agree that there's an opportunity to do something better for these wrestlers to protect them. Like can we not see if we can evolve the turnbuckles and maybe even the stairs, put padding, and I know that sounds stupid, but just simple things that might minimize the damage. And why do you think wrestling doesn't actually take that serious?
I don't know if it's that they don't take it serious. I mean, if you look, that's it. it's a very I don't want to say two-part question, but it's a divided question. So if you're talking about professional wrestling, and then you're talking about the WWE. The WWE is a publicly traded billion-dollar business. You know what I mean? They have to take those precautions, and they have. You don't see anybody taking chair shots to the head anymore. You're not allowed to. You don't see that kind of physical. They have actually taken the steps to do away with those things, on top of going out of their way to make sure that if one of their guys or girls has been injured or is showing signs of which, that they will make sure that you're getting the top of the line care that you can get. So I don't think that it would, in that context. Now, then there's the whole indie circuit and everything else out there trying to play, and they're trying to do whatever they can to get noticed. So they're going to do those extreme things. But at the end of the day, it's not up to the company, really. It's up to it is and it isn't. It's up to the individual, And I've always said it. My dad drilled that in my head from a young age, especially even when I got into the business. He's like, that stuff is not what gets you over. But it has been so ingrained in people's brains that you have to be extreme. And that's the culture these days. Back in the day, back in your dad's day, a finishing move was a DDT. Now you can't get a finishing move without 13 fucking power bombs, a half gainer off of a top rope through a table on fire onto a concrete floor filled with rattlesnakes. I mean, it's the shock value. People are numb to it.
It's lost its value, because I go back to what I loved about wrestling, and I'll be honest with you, I am a wrestling fan in the sense that I respect the athleticism, I respect the work ethic, and I know what it takes to look like that, and then to put your body through that. I've seen it. I didn't do it, but I know what my dad committed to. Like, we'd be on planes. This dude would be pulling out like tuna fish cans with crackers. So he stayed at 4% body fat. And I'm like, Dad, we have a steak right in front of it. No, he wouldn't do it. So the commitment that those guys have, and I know, I've been able to be around a lot of wrestlers. And the one thing that I have found was most of them don't know how to not be the wrestler. Like, I would be places with my dad, and he would be Mr. Wonderful. And I'd get so annoyed. And I'd be like, yo, your dad, chill out. So knowing that your dad was your dad, did you ever have to reel him in from being Garett Bischoff? Because I had to reel my dad in. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but there were times I had to go, Dad, you can, no, stop.
No, he, and there are guys like that. There's plenty. They have, especially when you're in it for a long time, you start to become that character full time. A lot of guys forget that you're not this person right now. You're just John Smith. But it's natural. It's a human nature. I mean, when you're this person, look at everything that you get. You get noticed. You get the people yaying or booing, or you get the people motherfucking or high fiving. You get the oh shit, look at who it is. Here, beer on me. Oh hey, let me get that. Who doesn't like that? I mean, if you say that you don't like that, I ain't buying it. Then you're in the wrong business.
Which actually brings me to this next question, which is that most people wrestle not for the money, but the recognition. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if I agree with that. The money, obviously the money's good, but it
for how long and for how many people?
It takes decades to get to the point where you're making good money. So you have to really, really love what you do. You have to really love this business and have a passion for it to even have a nano chance of making it to the point where you're actually going to be able to survive off of, as a full-time career. These guys are out there doing indie shows for $100. You know what I mean? And they'll do that for years and years and years and years and years. And then they may not even get a chance. You
Right.
know what I mean? And even nowadays, I mean, okay, so what? You get it. Let's say, okay, Garett, we're going to bring you in for $100,000 for 2 years. That ain't shit. It sounds like a lot.
It does.
I mean, that's not that. I wouldn't be able to afford to live my life and provide for my family. And I'm not saying
including the damage you would put on your body that wouldn't add up to the money you're making.
But at the end, it's at the end of the day. So no, I don't think it's. I mean, obviously the money is a big part of it, but there's 1% of the people make 99% of the money.
Right.
It's not the allure is there, the glamour which by the way is not as glamorous as everybody thinks it is. I promise.
It's dirty.
It's a passion driven business. I really
sure.
do. I really do believe that if you don't have the passion and really want it, and you're willing to suffer and live on the backseat of your car, or, in the Motel 6s and bunk up with 5 people at a time and travel with those same 5 stinky people, you're in the wrong business. You'll never make it.
I always think about the worst part about all the traveling on the road was the amount of protein my dad would eat and how much I would have to smell it in every car ride. God almighty, going with, in fact, I'm going to tell you a quick story. I know this is probably, we got from serious to funny, but my dad actually, he was with Bobby Heenan and, oh God, okay, I won't mention his name. I did just remember, but he actually locked the windows. He farted in the car and it stunk so bad that the guy threw up in the car. Then my dad pulled over and hit him because he threw up in the car and he had to smell the throw up. So 5 guys on the road does not sound appealing to me because I've heard the nastiest stories ever.
It's not, I don't I don't remember who I was in this car with this one night. We were on a house show looping. I think it was me. It might have been Christopher Daniels, Kazarian, AJ, a couple. I don't remember. There was a handful of guys. We're all loaded up in this van, and one of the boys, he was sick. Like he was flu sick but we were stuck in the middle of a fucking nowhere town on day 2. And we had 2 more. I mean, there was nowhere to go.
Yeah, you're like in Des Moines, Iowa. There's a CVS about 107 miles away.
Yep, that's how it is. We're wrestling, high school gymnasiums or whatever it is, and we had to, poor guy. We felt so bad for him, but he did. He sat there in that car ride and just puked in a bucket. And we all had to just kind of just deal with it. He's yarping in a bucket. I'm in the back, just trying to put my face in a road soda and just focus on something else, but yeah, it happens, but like I said, it's like I said, if you really got to want it, it's not the money's the icing on the cake if you even get there. If you get there, and I don't mean to be negative, but 9 out of 10, you ain't gonna get there. It just is what it is. And even if you do, you're making it for a couple of years, not for It's great to make $1 million a year, but I'll be honest with you, I've worked in corporate America. I've made that, but it was just over a longer period of time. Mm-hmm. So I also, don't have some of the other side of it. But, what's funny is I was watching some of the interviews, and as well as I do, we get asked the same questions over and over again. What's it like? What's it this? What's it that? And I could care less about that. What I do care about was when the hell did you get your black belt? Because I got mine from Butch Nunley and Tang Soo Do. I got my black belt when I was 9. So how old were you? I started at the age of around 6, and I trained all the way up to I think I was 16-ish when I finally got my black belt. Trained in Kempo, Aikido, and American, and I finished out at Joe Corley's school. And Ernest The Cat Miller gave me my black belt. He was my trainer. He was my instructor, my private instructor. Longtime family friend, still is to this day, and a phenomenal athlete. You want to talk about an athlete and a true legit bad son of a bitch. He hurt a lot of people back in the day. That video is hard to find sometimes, but let me just tell you, he's like the Anderson Silva. Like, he was a bad man. Like, he still is. He destroyed people. He still competes. He still competes in the Masters division. Does he really? And he wins. I mean, he's going. He's 50 plus years old right now, and he goes out there and he whoops on guys my age and younger. Listen, again, I go back to those guys were cut from a different cloth. And I think about what most people would go through if they had to stay in the cold weather outside in a tent for like a day. My dad would have done it for a month just to prove that he could. Yeah. I'm not wired that way. I'm not that generation. I'm like, no, thank you. Well, your old man was a tough son of a bitch. Which reminds me, the first time my dad took me hunting, we went to Ryan, Georgia, and we got down there at 4:00 in the morning, and I was so cold. I took my shoes and I put them inside his boots, and we tied those in, and I was putting my arms, through his jacket and everything. And it was the worst experience of my life, but we went out and I killed my first deer. And I know that you actually had been by my house in Fayetteville, you and your dad. And then my dad took you hunting as well. So I don't want to ruin it because I know a little bit, but you tell me that story, because I don't know how many people my dad was with
that were your age, 14, say 12 to 18, that he took a dad with them with their kid, and it was their first kill. And so when I heard you say that, I went, man, I like my nephews, my cousins, my own son. Like, I have those stories. So to hear it happen with you, I got to hear, what was that like?
It was really cool. I remember, and it wasn't my first year, but it was my mom calling. I remember, Dad come home. He was like, "Hey," I grew up hunting with my dad, so hunting has always been something that my dad and I have always done together. And he's like, "Hey, Orndorff's he's got this hookup on this deer and hog ranch down in Georgia. We're gonna go over the weekend." I said, "All right, let's go." And I remember we got up out of bed. It's like 2:00 in the morning. We get up and I'm sitting in the front seat drinking coffee with Dad. And, we meet at a gas station somewhere there off. I don't remember where we were. Who knows? And I think Rick Steiner was with. I'm pretty sure Rick Steiner was with us too.
Yeah, Rick would go. In fact, when because Rick lived up in North Georgia, what I'd say about an hour and a half outside of or maybe an hour outside Atlanta. And what was cool is when Rick Steiner would come down, when Rick Rude would come down. Your dad never did this, so I got to be honest, he's not my favorite. But they would let me borrow their car. So I got to drive Rick Rude's Jaguar to my prom because he was hunting with my dad that weekend.
Perfect. Well, his at the time it was a GMC Yukon, so his Rick's Jaguar is probably a lot cooler.
No. He had if I'm not mistaken, Steiner had a green GMC Yukon. Is that correct?
His was green, my dad's was black.
Okay, because I drove the green one. I didn't drive I see your dad never let me drive his car. What kind of man is this? I thought we were friends.
Well, we loaded up. We get down there, and we drive however long we drive. We get there, and it's just, it's a gorgeous property. And as we won't go into details, but know the history of that property. So it's just, there's a lot of unique. It's very unique, and the people that ran it at that time were very unique.
Yeah, I'll tell a quick part of that if you don't mind, just because. So it was one of my dad's best friends. The guy's name was Mike. We have our producer Tyler on, so I want to share with him real quick. So my dad would go down to this land, and there was a couple guys. One guy's name was Rock. One guy's name was Mike. Mike was blind and had been in a GMC truck, and it lit on fire while he was driving, and he couldn't get out of the car, and ended up blind and paralyzed. And he knew that land. I kid you not. It's like you see movies and TV shows about these like men that just have this like other sense. It was like you'd be walking and he would move out of the way of a tree, and you'd be sitting there waiting for him to hit it. Yeah. And you're nervous. Like I was so anxious going down there because he would walk, he eventually ended up in a wheelchair, but like it was crazy being around. These guys knew they knew hunting like you and I understand our bank account.
They're the definition of good old boys. Like
yes.
They don't get no more good old boy than
no. And guess what? Those were guys that if you called right now, I don't care where they were, what they were doing or what was going on. Not only would they come, but their wife would come with a shotgun.
You bet. You bet. Just a bunch of moonshine. And I remember as soon as we showed up, Mike came wheeling out in that wheelchair. And there was 3 jars of shine going this way and that. That's awesome. And I remember it because your dad got he ribbed my pops because my dad doesn't drink liquor really. He's not a liquor drinker. He's a beer drinker. He's like, come on here, have some shine. I don't know, I'm good. So he's like, all right, I'll go get you a beer. Well, he poured half that beer out and topped it off with shine. My old man took a big swing. Boom, got him.
Oh man, I'm not kidding. Like, and we'll keep this as brief and humane as possible. But if anybody's watching doesn't know what moonshine is, like you can read about it, but that was the real deal. That is. It's literally where your body feels like. I remember I didn't feel my face for like a week. Oh, yeah. I'm not even joking. Like you think I'm joking. Like he took me down there and I didn't have much, but I just remember waking up the next day. And after that, this is no joke. So I've been in barbecue competitions for the last decade, and I have big green eggs and stuff. Like after hunting a couple times, I don't want to hunt anymore. I just wanted to cook, like because I knew that was the safest way to live. Because nobody would get you drunk in front of a fire.
with a bunch of loaded firearms.
It was.
So, but we did. We had a ball. I ended up dropping a deer that weekend, and I mean, everybody had a lot of fun, and that was just one. There was another time, and I don't remember where it was, but dove hunting. Your dad loved to shoot doves too.
Y'all went down to Meriwether County, so
Yep.
it's on the other side of the south side. But I know because I went.
So we went and blasted doves together, a couple times, and it was just a ball. We had a ball, and just being that age, and then watching, these guys have so much fun, and then letting me be a part of it. Not letting me be a part of it, but enjoying me being a part of it as a kid. It's just, you're just one of the boys, And
I try to explain that to people that it was such and I think you'll understand this. I say that wrestling and all the individuals that are directly involved, and I don't mean kind of involved, I mean directly involved. It's a dysfunctional family that we all understand the perspectives because we've all been on both sides of it. How you have to explain to people this isn't real, but at the same time you're kayfabing what is real, and a lot of times you're protecting the family because it's your livelihood, right? I remember my mom used to say, the pastor came over one time and said, I wouldn't walk from here to the end of the mailbox to watch wrestling. And she goes, I'll walk from here to the mailbox to pick up the paycheck.
Yeah.
And so it paid, and that was what this business has done. So, I know we don't talk a lot about this, in wrestling. There, people that go into wrestling, again, it's kind of that weird purgatory of entertainment. Like it's real, but it's not real.
Yep.
And there's a lot of, fans get into it. Right. But we haven't seen a big political movement inside of the WWE or TNA. And you think about what the world is going through, like from the pandemic and the coronavirus and vaccinations and even inclusiveness. I grew up with Pat Patterson. He was openly gay back in the early 80s. But I'm curious, do you think that the boys would be willing to accept a homosexual wrestler in today's day and age?
Yeah, I do. I mean, listen, you're probably always gonna have one or two of those, hard-nosed motherfuckers that just don't want to for whatever reason. But in a general consensus, yes. I mean, look at Orlando Jordan. I mean, everybody knew him, and he's one of the best athletes you'll ever meet. Let me tell you something.
Oh, for sure.
And let me tell you something. If you actually got a bone to pick with Orlando Jordan, I guarantee you he's going to work your ass over, for legit. He's a bad son of a bitch. You know what I mean? It's just, and more and more now you're seeing. You see it in AEW. There's a couple over there that are more than open about it, and I think it's great. Why? I mean, at the end of the day, this business was built off of professionalism, and you didn't go into wrestling training because that wasn't the path you chose. But I'm sure you understood this. I'm sure your dad told you this, or at least you probably heard him talking about it. You'll understand it. Day one of wrestling training, if you've never been into a wrestling training school, your first day in, the first 5 minutes, you're getting taught how to respect the business. It's all about professionalism and respect. So if people don't do that, then they're eating their own words. Because at the end of the day, this is it's a job. You go out there, you be professional, you do your job. That doesn't mean you got to go hang out afterwards. If you don't want to, then don't. But at the end of the day, it's a job. You go out there, you do your job. You keep whoever you're in the ring with, you keep them safe. They keep you safe. You make them look good. They make you look good. Do your job. And I don't foresee that being an issue in the future. I think we're way beyond that.
I think we're headed that way for sure. From my perspective, we grew up in different, we're only 5 years or 6 years apart, but we grew up in different generations. So yeah. I saw wrestling from 1980 to 85, and those relationships that my dad, or even the conversations we were having, was still a perspective of the time. And, I think what I'm trying to get to is I never fully understood until my father passed, and we're coming up on 5 months. I never fully understood the impact that wrestling had on society. I got messages and emails and videotape. When I say from all over the world, I mean, I had to get it translated. Denmark, Paraguay, Chile, multiple places in Africa that I cannot pronounce. I mean, Poland, the Netherlands, it was in Scandinavia. Like, it was like, I would get these messages. I'm like, I thought I lived in this little town in Fayetteville, Georgia, and my dad was, kind of famous on USA Network and had a couple of matches. But what I didn't understand was the impact his persona, his intensity, his body had on other people. And so, after he passed, I think I came to understand maybe the responsibility that the wrestling community has today, that to promote. I go back to the 80s and I'm watching some of these videos where they're promoting, like my dad was promoting eating a healthy breakfast, and these kind of commercial, like I'm sitting there watching, like wrestling has a responsibility to its fans and its community to send a positive message. And I think one of the things that people forget is, Hulk Hogan was, the American made, right? It was eat your vitamins, take your prayers. Whether he was a hypocrite or not is irrelevant. What do you think WWE and Impact Wrestling and some of these coming out, like what do you AEW, what do you think their responsibility is to the community and the message they're sending, considering it's a violent, dramatic sport, but at the same time we don't want to fake that, and we don't want people to act that out in real life. What do you think that wrestling's responsibility is to our communities around the message they're sending?
I mean, obviously there's a responsibility, and it's like, and that has to do with any celebrity platform. I mean, the NFL, the NBA, I mean, celebrities, actors. If you're going to be a person who is looked up to in any way, shape, or form, and you have nowadays with Twitter and the platforms that are out there, if you have the power to be influencing massive amounts of people, especially young people, then you do have a responsibility to watch what you say and how you say it. That being said, it's not up to an actor or a celebrity or a company to make sure that your kids are doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's your parents' job. It's, what I mean? So, is there a responsibility to be aware? Absolutely. Is it your job? No.
I completely agree. I think about the fact that my dad was considered like the most hated wrestler, but when people remember him, they remember his work ethic. So the message he sent with his body, and they did relate it to his personality in the ring, that was this persona, but they knew what he was actually doing in real time in his real life. And I've always been grateful. I think the one thing that you and I can relate on as we kind of wrap up is I've been so grateful to have a father. He happened to be a wrestler, but I had a father who loved me and supported me, was transparent with me. There's conversations him and I had, I probably won't share until my mom has passed.
Right.
I'm sure you feel the same, like, because of some of the things that we saw, right? I was introduced to sex, drugs, and rock and roll at 6-7 years old, things people shouldn't see. And I was being protected from it. Like, it wasn't intentional. It was just kind of the times and whatnot.
You're around, you pick it up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that you would also say is, your dad, and I don't even want to call him Eric, your dad, he looked out for you as a man and as a father. He was a good man. And I think people forget that when we talk about these guys, like, your father was a good human being. Yes, that was an executive role in NW. He was so good at pissing people off because he was so good at being disciplined and being a good human being on the side that he could fake it. And so I think, one of the last things I would ask you is, the best advice I ever heard my father give anybody else was to Steve Austin. And he said, that there's life after wrestling, because they were two lifers, right? And for me, the best advice he gave me was centered around, discipline, work ethic, and how I treated people, right? And my father is a Christian, he was a man of faith. But my last question for you and I hate to narrow it down to such a simple sentence, so please expound if you want. What life lesson did your father teach? I don't care about wrestling. what life lesson did your father teach you that you feel has centered you over, having gone through a 10-year career in wrestling? Like, you've obviously come back and have an amazing family and a beautiful family and a beautiful wife and whatnot. Like, you are an exception to the rule of people that grow up in entertainment. You didn't turn into, some kind of drug addict or prisoner. There was obviously conversations had with you because your father was absolutely present. He was at your karate matches and things like that. And we've talked about that. So what was the advice your father gave you that helped you stay centered in the midst of this chaos that we know as wrestling?
I mean, it definitely was more. There isn't just one. Like you said, it's definitely not just one answer to that. I mean, to this day, I still get it. I still get those lessons. But and it's kind of a two-part question, I guess. But growing up, as much as my old man was on the road, which you completely understand, as much as he was on the road, when he was home, he was home.
Absolutely.
He made time for my sister. Like it was family time.
Nothing else was important in the world at that point.
Nope. It was one-on-one time. So we do family things together. He would take me hunting. He would take my sister to do whatever they had together for their things. So there was one-on-ones. There was family time. There was always plenty of. When he was home, which just through osmosis, growing up, we learned how to be family people. Like I learned how to be a family man from him.
He did what he needed to do when he was there, even when he was on. I don't know how many phone calls did you get a night after you finished maybe your football game and your dad couldn't be there, and your dad called you. I heard you made a great catch. Great job. Like that conversation. Yeah, that's what I talk about them being good men is they were present. So when I was 18, I'll tell you a quick story. My dad was in Buffalo. It was right when he got his neck hurt. And he called me right before he got his neck hurt to give me my 18th birthday present was a Ford Mustang. And I never thought my dad was gone. Like, I know that he was. Like, people talk about he was on the road, but it never felt that way. Yeah. And I never felt disconnected from my father. Now, I'll tell you, I hated Disney World. Because we'd have to go down there and film at MGM Studios in July for a month and stay at that damn cabana. I know you
live there for a month.
I hate Disney World. That place can die. I'm sorry.
Disney World, not so bad. Orlando.
Excuse me. Yes. And for God's sakes, it's Kissimmee, not Kissimmee. But I think that's what I would say. There's not one single thing my father said, but it was his consistency of being present as a father.
Yep.
That he I want to say this to fans as we end this. Our fathers never asked to call them Garett Bischoff and Paul Orndorff, and they never did a wrestling move on us when we were underage because that's child abuse. Don't ask goofy questions, people. I love you. I respect you. But just understand, these were human beings that were fathers. These guys were cut from a different cloth, but never forgot their number one responsibility as fathers. And I think you feel the same way.
Yeah, no, absolutely it was. And and to this day, like I said, my parents are getting ready to come down here from Wyoming for Christmas. Looking forward to seeing them. And my dad's my best friend. He was my best man in my wedding. My
dad would have been the same had he had been able to. Because to me, my dad was my best friend as well. So, Garett, I feel like we're family now. I don't know how to describe it, but there's a connection here. I don't care if we ever do another podcast. Please, let's keep in touch, man.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you guys reaching out. And this is perfect timing because my battery's about to go on me. But I appreciate you reaching out. Like I said, I don't do a whole lot of these anymore, but this one was something special. We have a connection there that a lot of people don't get. And
did you enjoy it? Was this different?
Absolutely. This was a lot of fun, and I'd love to do it again because I feel like there's probably, now that we're starting to get rapping, I feel like there's probably a lot more.
Oh, I've got notes on another page. I just had to show it up.
Let's set up another one. Let me get my tag team partner Wes Briscoe in here because
I'd love that, man.
He would be. We'll do a little thing. I'll get him in here together. We'll drive back and forth.
I'd love it. We can talk about some crazy stuff. So listen, man, I want to tell you, God bless you, man, and tell your father. I haven't seen him in 25 years, but I mean this. When my dad got hurt, when my dad got hurt in Buffalo, and he ended up getting long-term disability from Turner. If your father had not signed him to a contract, I don't know what my dad would have done financially. So I know that's a little more in depth and a little more personal, but your father means more to me than he'll ever know, and I'll never get the chance to really tell him. But luckily, building a relationship with you, I think he'd be happier for that than anything. So God bless you, man, and we'll talk to you later.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. Hey, cheers. Enjoy your weekend.